I think we heard a lot of different reasons to be against it. I want to move on to the banks.
I did, yes.
I want to move on to the banks because this is the next big issue coming. And, you know, what we're seeing is many more economists, that, as I talked about, Secretary Geithner's plan had several different elements, setting up a new public-private partnership to buy these toxic assets, new capital injections to the bank, didn't say how much money would be required, a new stress test for the banks. But we all saw that reaction in the markets. Now, they may have reacted badly because they didn't get what they were hoping for, which is a big bailout. But a lot of economists now saying that what could be needed is bite the bullet nationalization. Nouriel Roubini, one of the men who saw the crisis coming, said nationalization is the answer in today's Washington Post. President Obama says no.
Sweden has a different set of cultures in terms of how the government relates to markets. And America's different, and we want to retain a strong sense of private capital fulfilling the core investment needs of this country.
But Congresswoman Waters, Mr. Roubini and others say we're all Swedes now, that we should just do what they did when they faced their crisis. They nationalized the banks and they came out of it okay.
George, as you know, the word nationalization scares the hell out of people. And so the debate has been opened up now, and that's good. Let's talk about it. We know that as we have this capital infusion into these banks, we're owning more and more of them. Citibank is probably almost nationalized with the amount of money that we've put in it. But I don't think that we are ready to move to the point of a formalized, nationalized banking program yet.
Even if it's the only thing that will work?
Well, we may get to that point, and I'm not opposed to that. But I think the discussion is just opening up. This is new for America.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to slow down the tempo of your show. I think this is some place where we really should try to work together. I actually worked with Chuck on Top One. This is a very, very critical issue. And so let's see what Geithner is going to propose. I wish he had been a little more specific this week, but I assume that's going to come out soon.
As you learned more about what he proposed, were you more comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable with Geithner. I know he didn't pay his taxes. I know all those issues. But the fact is, he is a very smart guy. He understands the issues. And I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt up front to at least get the debate going and get it on the table.
The reason I did vote for him is because I talked with Chuck and Pete. He has a good reputation. I think he's a smart guy. I think if you put most of our major banks under a stress test, they're going to fail. And this
stress test is starting this week.
This idea of nationalizing banks is not comfortable, but I think we have gotten so many toxic assets spread throughout the banking and financial community throughout the world that we're going to have to do something that no one ever envisioned a year ago, no one likes. But to me, banking and housing are the root cause of this problem. And I'm very much afraid that any program to salvage the bank is going to require
so what would you
the
do
government
now?
to get. I would not take off the idea of nationalizing the banks.
We've come a
Let me
long
just say
way.
Well, George Bush, a very conservative president, had more government intervention in the financial system than any president in history. But I would not be for nationalizing. I think government's not good at making these decisions as to who gets loans and how this happens. I think the Geithner plan, despite the fact that the market was disappointed, it didn't have details, and I think that was just bad signaling, is a very good plan. And I think when the details are learned, I'm going to explain why. When the details are learned, people are going to like it. First, it's bold and big. This idea of dying a death of 1,000 cuts, this bank is in trouble, we deal with that, this company's in trouble. No, you saw headlines of newspapers, $2.5 trillion when you add in the Fed and everything else, even though it's only using the TARP money that we have. Second, he doesn't go for the mistake, I think, that Secretary Paulson made, one size fits all. Every bank needs capital injections. Every bank needs bad assets taken off their balance sheets. Rather, he says we have 4 basic tools. We're going to examine each bank that has trouble and see which policy meets their needs. Sometimes it'll be capital injection. Sometimes it'll be bad assets. Sometimes it'll be something else. That makes sense. But the third thing, which people always discount, is this TALF. The TALF goes around Wall Street and gets right to the borrowers.
Using their own capital.
It's the Federal Reserve using its own capital to bolster the lending markets, and they're going to go right to the consumer. They're going to look at credit card loans. They're going to look at home loans. They're going to look at auto loans, which are now, you can't get a car loan even if you have a good credit rating. And they're going to look, Peter, they're going to look at small business loans. Now, this worked when they did it for 2 smaller areas, commercial paper and interbank lending. They're now going to talk about that on a broad basis,
So let me
and
see
that
if we
should
have,
get
let
the
me,
economy kick-started.
Let me see if we have something of a consensus here, if I'm hearing it correctly, and do correct me if I'm not, is that it sounds like you have a consensus here to give Geithner a chance. Let's see if these stress tests will work, but if not, it sounds like everyone except Senator Schumer is open to a much more radical infusion of cash.
I hate to say, I think Chuck and I are somewhat on the same page here on this, and Lindsay and Maxine are almost on the same page, which I don't know what this means about the world.
I'm going to have to edit this program.
New kind of bipartisanship.
I'm sure President. I'm sure President Obama is watching the show this morning. I would just urge him not to repeat what happened with the stimulus bill. If everyone is at the table early on, I think you can see a chance for real progress.
Let me just
Well,
say,
Chuck, I have to say that I would like to see a lot more details from Geithner. And I am absolutely focused on the foreclosure problem. We have to dedicate a significant amount of that money to dealing with these foreclosures.
We're going to see that from the president this week, right? $50 billion to reduce the cost for most homeowners
right,
who are
although,
facing
you know,
trouble.
on that one, I
That's
would
right.
try to move it up to $100 billion.
would
I
too.
agree
Easily.
that the housing area is the key to this
It's the epicenter.
and dealing with it. The one thing I think they're going to do in housing, which I think is pretty good, is they're going to focus a little more on the servicer and the bondholder and use some sticks as well as some carrots
so they're gonna give
and
some-
get them to the table.
Yes.
And get them to the table and have them write down the mortgages so no one is
right.
paying more than 31% of their income.
Right.
Makes sense to you?
Yes, it does, and that's why I put 20-something billion in the bill for the FDIC to do that. If you don't stabilize housing, you're never going to fix this problem. The way you stabilize housing is you try to get control of foreclosures. You
That's
try
right.
to stop the bleeding of the housing market.
That's right.
That's why you needed the full Isaacson Amendment to get excess inventory. You've got a huge inventory problem. You got foreclosures have to be dealt with, and that goes back to banks. I think we've done too little, too late. I think the TARP opportunity was a missed opportunity. We've soured the public on bailouts. This bill makes it harder for all of us to come together and get another $500 billion. So the country needs to understand this puzzle: banking, housing, and general economy. The general economy will never improve till you do something about credit and banking and housing, and we've just scratched the surface to the major problem this country faces. So taking an idea off the table, no matter
You put
how...
one
let
other
me
idea-
just
wait,
say
let me just say, you put one other idea on the table. You think it's going to take another $500 billion that hasn't been asked for
I've
yet
been to the
for
budget
the
committee,
banks.
and they tell me that $315 billion left in TARP will not isolate the toxic assets and jumpstart housing.
We're running out of time. I just want to
think
know,
it's
do you
gonna
all
take
agree with
less
that? Is it
money
going to take
buy up
more
those
money?
toxic assets. They're going to write them down to about 5 cents on a dollar. Get the private sector involved, and they're going to get rid of
Banks
all
will
of those
fail if
toxic.
we write
I
them
would
down
just
to
make
5 cents.
one
We
other
got
quick
5
point.
seconds.
You can have a big, bold, successful plan without nationalization. That's what the administration is trying to do.
And let's try to work together on it. Let's really work together from the
On that
start, and we
note-
won't be repeating this what we're doing today.